And give me a second to get live stream going. Okay, perfect. Hi guys, welcome to our Cognitive Leads Tech Meets Mental Health interview series. So in this series, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will be engaging in dialogues with various experts in digital mental health field across the course of the series. Today, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will interview our amazing speaker, Noah Robinson. Welcome. And he is the founder and CEO of Very Real Health. So just a quick little bit about our sponsors today. Tech Meets Mental Health interview series is brought by Cognitive Lead Solutions Leap. And so a little bit about the company. So at Cognitive Lead, we offer a very comprehensive closed loop solution to children's attention and emotional challenges. So our interventions include the innovative virtual reality attention tracker that Professor Skip has been working on. And we also have 8 online assessments and precision AI-based brain optimization training and therapeutic music, exercise, and family-assisted programs. So all of these are like what our company has built, and it has a very strong research and development team with world-renowned experts who focus on neurology, cognition, psychology, engineering, and artificial intelligence. So we're currently working on an FDA study for the approval of our virtual reality classroom and diagnosing ADHD in children. So I would like to introduce our host, Professor Skip Rizzo.
Okay, Jessica, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm going to jump right into it here and introduce Noah. Now, I believe I met you at the Stanford event. Now, God, it's almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was quite an epic event in that it brought together a lot of people across the spectrum of clinical VR applications. And everybody, I think at the end of the conference, when we were sitting around drinking beers, everybody said that all the presenters really brought their best game along the way. And it was really a stimulating event. And anyway, not to walk too far down memory lane, I remember you came up to me and we chatted. And as we were chatting, I said, this guy is the future. This is a person that has that same level of energy, motivation, inspiration. I could go on and list a bunch of adjectives, but I was impressed, and I thought to myself, this is a guy I want to get to know a little more, and perhaps over time partner with some projects. So let's start off. You know, I want to hear a little bit about how you got to this point. We'll talk a little bit about the Help Club application that you've developed with Very Real Health, and you know the way that you're implementing that and the vision for it and what you've done so far. But you know, let's start off with hearing a little bit about you. You know, what made you get on the crazy train of VR?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and it's really exciting to be here. I've looked up to you for a long time, read your papers, many papers in the field, and yeah, so it's amazing to be having this conversation right now. Yeah, so I mean, I think really what got me into virtual reality specifically was trying it, which I think has been for a lot of people just experiencing that suspension of disbelief when, you know, being transported to another world is such a profound experience. And the second I experienced that, I was really excited about the potential. It was the Oculus DK2 about 6 years ago when I was at NIH. But what really got me excited, so I experienced that and it was really cool. I was on a spaceship and seeing planets. I bought my own DK2. But when I brought it home and put the headset on and went to a social environment for the first time, and I put on the headset and I was alone in my room in the real world, but when I put on the headset, I was with other real people and I could see their head movements. They were just floating blocks at the time because it was, you know, so primitive. Mm-hmm. That was when I knew that basically I wanted to devote my life to exploring VR because of the power of feeling that presence with other people in real time.
Wow. Well, so the social element of VR is what gave you the bug. What got you to that point? I mean, you have a rich background. You were in computer science for a while, I believe, and now you're a clinical psychologist. Can we hear a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I think so. I've always been really interested in technology and psychology. But I really started using technology kind of as a coping mechanism. When I was 13, I realized that I was gay and I became very depressed and anxious. And I basically escaped into an online virtual world called RuneScape. And I spent 8,000 hours logged into RuneScape. Basically, yeah, it's as if I had a full-time job, 40 hours a week for 5 years. So
Wow,
I lived in RuneScape
that's
basically.
some lived experience.
Yes, it's almost to the 10,000 hour mark. But you know that I escaped the real world and lived in this virtual world. And you know, I leveled up these virtual levels. I gained the currency. I made friends. I led a clan of 400 people, and all the while I was depressed in the real world. But I was getting hits of dopamine that were motivating me to. It really kept me going, I think, in my teenage years, and gave me that sense of validation. And so in this virtual world where I was anonymous and could be an avatar, I was able to form relationships, explore my identity, talk to people in this completely different setting. And so kind of moving forward in my, you know, as I started research in psychology and things, I was really interested in seeing, is it possible psychologists build games like RuneScape or World of Warcraft, but could psychologists design something that allows people to escape, but while they're escaping, they can actually receive intervention or learn coping strategies for their problems?
Well, you know, this is you're bringing up a really important issue here. You know, particularly a lot of times one of the tackling dummies in this kind of VR is that people are going to lose themselves in the virtual world and not spend time in the real world. And you know, it sounds like you're describing a little bit of that, but that you took something away from it. And this has always been something I remember when Second Life had set up a world called Brigadoon for folks on the autism spectrum. It was a safe place where these folks could actually engage in conversations behind their avatar and really you know, have social interactions that for whatever reason with their clinical condition, they have difficulty with in the real world. And so I always pointed to that as like, look, you can always say, well, somebody's going to lose himself in the virtual world, but what are they doing if they didn't have that virtual world? Would they be sitting watching TV? Would they be playing video games? At least in this context, people are having social interaction that hopefully builds something in the person that does translate to the real world. You know, what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think that just like with any technology, there's a negative component where it can be an escape, but we can also meet people where they're at and deliver the intervention while they're escaping. I think it's interesting because this came up. So VR chat is a big metaverse world that kind of started around the time that I tried the DK2, and it was just 20 of us meeting once a week. And now they've actually surpassed, now they have 9 million accounts and they've surpassed Second Life in terms of active users concurrent. But you know, it's interesting because people started asking me when they knew I was in psychology, they said, I go to work in the real world and I come home and then I go into VR chat and I get all my social support from avatars in VR chat. They would ask me, is that a disorder? And I would tell them that it's hard to say because, you know, in psychology, we define mental health disorders based on how it's affecting real life function. And there's debates over what is a disorder and what isn't. So if someone's not avoiding the real world, but they're just getting a lot of social support in the virtual one, are they even escaping, or are they just adapting and finding the best way? Like if someone's on the autism spectrum or if someone's transgender and they can't transition into the real world, but they're able to be the opposite gender in the virtual world, is that a problem? And then also one other thing is that with COVID, all of a sudden these people who were whose main source of social support were in the virtual world, they were the people least affected by the shutdowns because they just kept socializing. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about kind of where we draw that line of what is a disorder and, you know, what's just adaptation.
Yeah, you know, I think people have to use the term addiction very carefully, particularly when it comes to media. You know, would you say a teenager in the 50s and 60s that spent 2 or 3 hours talking on telephone, hardwired telephone, was addicted to interaction with other people, voice interaction? Or would you say, well, you can't always see the person in person and you have to be home and do your homework and all that, this becomes just another mechanism for connectedness? And I think we still have quite a bit to study on this. I'm sure there are at-risk populations. But when I look at, one of the criteria for my decision-making on this is, what is it replacing? If somebody's spending all this time doing this, what would they be doing otherwise? And a lot of times what they'd be doing otherwise isn't necessarily the most productive or growth-oriented activity. It's case by case, a lot of research is needed. But, this has been a long-standing issue with social VR. I'm not sure how much you're aware, but in the 90s and early 2000s, there were a number of these, online avatar-based chat rooms. Bruce Dahmer wrote a pivotal book called Virtual Avatars, I believe. My memory serves me. But, and it really talked about people that built exotic environments themselves, kind of like what Second Life later became. I think one was called Active Worlds. I think I went to a conference in one of those, very kludgy, back in maybe the late 90s. But it showed where some of this was going. And, then the next question was, how do we harness this in ways that can be clinically useful? And that's what I see you doing now. Can you tell us a little bit about Help Club and what the mechanism, the structure, and so forth?
Yeah. So one other thing to mention in my trajectory that led me to start Help Club is that in college, I knew I wanted to become a clinical psychologist and go to grad school, but I couldn't start doing therapy as an undergrad, but I could work on a crisis hotline. And they trained us in some basic Rogerian skills and open-ended questions and empowerments and things like that. But and we could even see people could come in and we could have one session with them in person. That kind of seemed like a therapy session, but we were always told, this is not therapy. You can't see someone multiple times. This is not therapy. You're not a therapist. And I was thinking, so what is the difference between my senior year in college and someone who's in their first year of grad school in the clinical psychology doctoral program, who all of a sudden with the right supervision can be doing therapy? In both situations, the person is just talking with another person. There's obviously the expectation of what the patient is receiving is different, but that question really led me on this kind of journey to explore the research of how far can we push peer-based intervention, lay counselors, and train them in basic skills and use the environment as well to teach some of the key principles that are taught in therapy. So that's kind of what led us to develop Help Club. And we started seeing that when you can create this virtual environment and pop up 3D tools that are from key principles of CBT and train peers on how to help each other, that all of a sudden we can create this world that people can come to whenever they want, however much they need it, and they can actually learn some of those key principles just by interacting with each other or interacting with people who have a very basic level of training. So that's kind of the basic idea and the foundation of Help Club.
I see a dynamic tension here because, if you're calling it a clinical application, there are certain guidelines and, legal structures certainly for who can deliver that and who can advertise that and so on. By the same token, the idea of helping peer support, as long as you're properly, describing what the person is going to get, and that it may not be a complete replacement for, intensive therapy by a trained clinician. I think these are issues, but, considering the challenges we have with helping people at least put a toe in the water towards discussing some of their issues. I think these sorts of applications have some value, but we have to be careful. I mean, do you guys have review sessions of how a session might have gone or anything like that?
Yeah, we do a few things that are really important in this area. One is that we make sure everybody coming in has to go through a consent process where they understand this is not therapy. It should not be replacing treatment. It's also not crisis intervention because our peers are not trained to help people who are in crisis. So we offer resources. So we really try to make sure that people, before they can even talk to someone else, that they understand, they have informed consent of understanding what this is and what this isn't. because we don't want people to replace, a therapist with what we're doing when we haven't even proven whether or not it works.
Right.
So really, so we really make sure that people understand that. And I think we kind of are in this stepped care model where we could be the most accessible level of care with the peer-based intervention. But if people need a higher level of care, then they should definitely be seeing a therapist or kind of, escalating to that higher level of care. So that's kind of how we've been approaching it so far, and really making sure that we're not making claims about treating anything. We're really just providing support and structured support so that we can teach people some of those key principles that are taught in CBT and things like that.
I think
And more of a self-help.
Yeah, we know that social support is a major factor in many areas of human existence in terms of recovering from illness, dealing with mental health conditions, wide range of areas where the research, is documented that social support may be a key element for somebody successfully getting past something or improving or making a decision to seek more formal treatment. Certainly that's one of the factors that people talk about in treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. If people have a good social support network, they're going to, number one, be more likely to get into an evidence-based treatment, but some of that, what they get from that treatment will be better, integrated into their everyday life. So I think that's an important element here. Why don't I pop up a quick video I have queued up of Help Club, and then we can chat off of that. Let me just share my screen here. Oop, hold on. I've got to unshare and enable audio. I always forget that with this. They should just default to
technology.
Yeah, I know. Okay, here we go. Hopefully everybody you can see this okay.
Help Club utilizes the immersive nature of virtual reality to help users defy distance and virtually escape their surroundings, transporting them to their own happier place. Once transported to our Built for Wellness worlds, users will be immediately provided with resources, calming games, and guided exercises to help them recenter, recharge, and re-energize their well-being. Help Club is also accessible through desktop or mobile phones in a 2D mode for those who don't have access to virtual reality. Most users will also have access to a groundbreaking form of group intervention called cognitive behavioral immersion. This proprietary, peer-led group approach gives users unlimited access to potentially life-changing mental health help. These event-based group sessions focus on issues that are important to users. These aren't led by therapists or doctors. It's not healthcare. Anyone can train to become a helper and begin to make an impact in the lives of others. We will also have staff in Help Club 24/7 to ensure a positive, curated experience for all. Our team includes leading VR developers and top mental wellness experts. We've built successful games, facilitated thousands of peer-led self-help groups, and have a leadership team capable of establishing our app as a novel, groundbreaking new form of mental health intervention. For more information on Help Club from Very Real Help, visit our website at veryrealhelp.com.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So what are some of the challenges for getting this up? I mean, you're still in graduate school, you're finishing your doctorate, so you've got to have one hell of a load just for that part of it, let alone managing something like this.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. Last semester I was fundraising, running the company, and doing my qualifying exam at the same time. So, but luckily, it's all worked out. So, it's been exciting. I mean, I think some of the challenges, one, in general, in research and clinical psychology, it's really hard to, if we want to build an intervention, it's really important to have a relationship with industry, because we can't just have, if we have some grant funding and, we can build something once, but it's constantly evolving and adapting the technology and the experience to the end users. That's the way that we can create something that's compelling and that I think will be effective. So that was one challenge, but starting Very Help and having a company and creating a whole business model around the intervention has been something that has been really helpful to growth and actually acquiring users and things like that. In terms of the actual implementation, I think, one challenge is actually kind of getting on the Oculus Quest store, actually. So, Facebook has a very tight grip on what apps are accessible to Oculus Quest users. The Quest makes up about 80% or 85% of the market share of headsets right now. So there's a walled garden, but we've kind of been able to work a little bit to be on the alternative app store and get some distribution there. And then also the training of our coaches has been, that's been a big a challenge, but also an exciting area that we kind of developed as we've implemented the app.
How do people come to volunteering for this?
So it's been interesting. So far, it's anytime at Vanderbilt, for example, that I give a talk to an undergrad class, and I just mentioned that, there's an opportunity to learn some peer counseling. There's people just like I was in college interested in gaining some experience. There's a lot of people out there who are interested. So that's one kind of element of our coaches. The other element are people who might be retired, people in recovery from substances, people who have a desire to help others and are empathetic. Maybe they could have been therapists in a different life, but they have those skills. They like listening and reflecting. And so we just train them just a little bit in terms of, some of the basic skills of open-ended questions and making sure that they're not being judgmental, and then teaching some of the basic cognitive behavioral tools that are taught to patients in general. And by learning all of that, they're able to lead these groups. And their goal is really just to facilitate a positive experience where people can come together, feel social support, and learn a little bit of psychoeducation around some of the tools that can help them. So these are not therapy sessions, but really it's just facilitating this positive bonding experience where people can share and be vulnerable and hopefully improve, in terms of their negative symptoms.
What do your supervisors in your graduate program say about all this?
Well, my current supervisor is amazing. Steve Holland, he's a protege of Aaron Beck. So Aaron Beck, the creator of cognitive behavioral therapy, is my academic grandfather. And Steve has been, and Aaron, Tim, he goes by Tim. Tim is 100 years old. He just turned 100 and he's still writing papers, and he's just amazing. He's really brilliant. And Steve is unbelievable as well. And so it's been amazing. He's been extremely supportive. But it's interesting because when I started out, I didn't have as much support. There was a lot of skepticism I actually switched mentors, and Steve is now my mentor. But I think that there was a lot of skepticism about the virtual reality component and a lot of the a phrasing that, this is a hammer and you think everything is a nail kind of.
Right.
And yeah, I think VR is a pretty profound hammer psychologically, that when you can change the environment that someone's in, that's a pretty big hammer. And I think there are a lot of nails that your research has shown in all these different areas. And I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible with VR. So my original mentors didn't really support that, but Steve took me in and he's been completely supportive. And really, he said, he took me in to be supportive and kind of help me along. But once he started talking to the people who were experiencing the intervention, he said, you really have something here. He got really excited about it because he was seeing that people are learning the concepts that we typically teach in CBT in just 1 or 2 sessions. What normally might take 6 or 8 in-person therapy sessions, someone's learning how to apply, how to take a step out of their situation and re-examine their beliefs, or try alternative behaviors to address their situation, assertion training. In just 1 session, people are learning a lot of these skills that typically take a lot longer. So he's very excited about that.
Well, I strongly believe that VR isn't just a hammer. It can be a screwdriver sometimes. It can be a pair of pliers. I think we're really moving to a point where VR is a toolkit. It's not just one tool. I mean, yes, it has that core element of simulation and interaction and quantification of responses within these simulations under controlled conditions, all that stuff. But there's so many different ways that you apply the tool, that it's a toolbox now. And every clinical condition, every patient, every clinical process requires different elements. Sometimes VR and associated technologies are not so well suited. And just traditional face-to-face talk therapy is fine. I think in some sense, you're bringing some of those elements at a lower scale, certainly not therapy, but you're bringing some of that, but you're removing the challenge of having to be face to face. A lot of times, sometimes people feel, from some of our research, sometimes people are more forthcoming and more honest in discussing their experience when they have a little bit of distance, by way of the avatar and online and so on. They can preserve some of their identity until they feel comfortable. I think there's something here very worthy of exploring, particularly in a world where, 2/3 of people in the world just do not get care for mental health. And that's part of our mission, I think, is to destigmatize issues around mental health and get people to accept, you have a cold, maybe take a Tylenol Plus to help you sleep. Same thing here. Okay. Do you have a good aspirational story about anybody that's participated in Help Club that you'd like to share with us?
Oh yeah. There's so many. I guess one thing that happened recently, which was kind of interesting. I was doing a demo for a potential investor, and I messaged the community and said, "Hey, anyone around want to pop in and just say hi?" And we had a few people come in, and someone from our community told the investor that, and this is a person who's been very active in the community. I've observed them in groups many, many times, and they said that they have severe social anxiety and would never be able to speak in front of a group in the real world. And what was so surprising to me is that, I've been trained clinically on how to diagnose social anxiety disorder, and kind of, if someone's very afraid to speak, I might be able to get that sense. I had no idea that this person had any social anxiety, because the only time that I have observed them was in our application. They were completely comfortable talking and exchanging and being supportive of others and getting support. So I think that shows the power of changing the context and the environment. So many disorders are related, our fears and what we're thinking, and social anxiety is often, misinterpreting social cues, and the person might be so in their head that they're monitoring everything they're saying, and then it's harder to socialize. So by changing the context and creating new opportunities for interactions and behaviors, we can just kind of bypass a lot of what someone might be experiencing and deliver and teach them the skills that they can use in the real world. And I think that's one other thing to mention, back to what you were saying before about VR and who it might be helpful for. I think all treatments work better for some people than others. And there's I think there's this movement towards individualization of treatments in the field. And so I don't think VR is the answer for everybody, but I think for a lot of people, or a subset of people, it can be very effective, just like this individual who never would be able to go in front of a group in the real world.
Fascinating. So, all right, you were at the very beginning of your career and you got out to a fast start. Do you see yourself continuing to stay in the social VR domain, or do you have other areas that you want to start to explore at any point, or where are you heading with all this?
Yeah, I've thought somewhat about this, but I think what I hope with what we're building, I hope it can be similar to, actually, another thing in college that I experienced was I worked in a clinic where they videotaped psychotherapy sessions, and we got to watch the videotapes and code them for different variables. And my mentor there, Clara Hill, has built a whole career off of measuring the different variables that happen during the delivery of intervention and trying to improve it and see what works for whom. And so I'm hopeful that we can build Help Club into a transdiagnostic intervention that's a step within a stepped care model, where it can be the first level of access for a lot of different people, and we can record data and use that to understand how we can improve treatment and maybe even develop new types of interventions. Automation is something I'm really excited about. So really building an experience and a kind of a mental health peer support platform that allows anybody to get help. And we can also use that platform to better understand the causes of psychopathology and potential new ways to go about treating the different disorders. I think that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with the company and my career in the future.
What do you see as on the horizon in terms of doing research with this platform and with this type of application?
We built it to be a clinical research platform and have NIH funding. So, there's self-report surveys, we can collect objective behavioral data as well. So we're already using it for research, and I'm really excited for that to continue to grow. I think there's a lot of potential to collect the data and then use it to help people. Because I think right now also there's so much of data collection is all about advertising and collecting as much as possible to sell the person's data. But what if we could actually collect data and then give it back to the person so that if they do need to see a therapist, they could take that data with them? Imagine someone who goes to a therapist and in their first session, their therapist can see 8 months of depression scores and anxiety scores and they could choose to reveal whatever problems that they've been working on. Maybe that could really help to expedite things. So that's something I'm really excited to explore as well.
What's NIH's angle? What are they looking for in your research that they funded?
We have a grant through the HEAL initiative to provide support for individuals with opioid use disorder who are receiving medication-assisted treatment to help with the cravings, and then we can be the kind of psychosocial addition for the peer support and substance use in the addiction recovery field. That's where we've seen the most research on peer support and its potential. And there it shows that social support is the most important factor across all the different modalities as well.
I recall when we first met you, you were very interested in the whole substance use domain in this particular app. What do you see in the future of whether it's Help Club or other applications in addiction or substance use treatment and so on? It's becoming, it's already been a hot topic, and certainly people have been doing research with Q Exposure, Patrick Bordnick, and many others over time. But where do you see that field heading?
It seems like, especially for the opioid crisis that's gotten, is continuing to worsen, especially with the pandemic, it does seem like medication-assisted treatment is something that's very helpful as an immediate solution to reducing cravings. But I really think that the technology, and especially if we can make it accessible, making it, as accessible as possible for people to just dip their toe, like you were saying, into the intervention and start experiencing it. I think that's what we're going to start to see, this kind of pairing of both medication to help with the cravings, but then increasing the access to some kind of intervention and mental health support. And the reason I think virtual reality is especially effective and positive environments and social support and things like that is that if someone's having a craving, like we know cravings last for, about 15 minutes or so at home. And so if someone's having a craving and they're in their home environment and they can put on a headset and completely remove themselves and go to a different world, get social support, talk to people, and they get through that 15 minutes of the craving, then that could potentially prevent relapse. And so that's where I really think the power of the virtual reality specifically and the full immersion instead of a 2D experience could be really powerful for substance use.
It kind of takes the model of AA and calling your sponsor in a high-risk situation to another level.
Yes, exactly. Just engaging in that.
Yeah. What about what are your recommended age ranges for people to participate? How low in the age span have you had people involved in this? Since
we're always thinking about ethics and wanting to make sure that we're not potentially doing any harm to anybody, since this whole thing is experimental. So 18 and above has been our target. We just require everybody to be over 18. And I do think eventually that this would be really appealing to teenagers who like to play Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft and kind of live in the virtual world like I did as a teenager. But for now, we're really targeting above 18. However, it's been interesting because we have I mean, we have 18 to 30 is a pretty, we have a lot of people in 18 to 30, maybe 30%, but we also have a lot of people between the 30 to 60 age range as well. So it's been interesting because I would have predicted that it would be all younger people, but that's not necessarily the case. There's been a lot of people who are interested in experiencing something like this, perhaps because of the anonymity and combined with the pandemic, looking for other alternatives. So it's been interesting. The age range has been much more diverse than I would have expected in the beginning.
Well, children and young teenagers and so on, they're online quite a bit, and they engage in a lot of these kinds of, one of the primary vehicles for the social interaction. So they're getting exposed to a lot of uncontrolled content. And while I definitely believe you've got to do your due diligence with an adult population before you go down to younger kids, but more supervised applications that target some of the needs, say, of children that are bullied, or children that have identity issues or gender issues, whatever. This, I mean, it's going to be a real challenge to make that case, in a sense of the administrative issues, the ethical, professional issues. Would a parent come after you if they found their kid interacting in one of these worlds? And you got a whole career's worth of work ahead of you on this, and I think it's going to be split 50-50 between the actual nuts and bolts mechanics of keeping this up and running, and also operating it and so forth, but also these kinds of ethical and professional issues, and certainly consultation with people that have been in the field for a long time. I think is going to be clinical oriented people that have a good grounding in professional ethics. I think is going to be important, because I'm not sure if there's a black and white here, as most serious ethical issues reside in the gray, halftone gray area.
Yeah, and that's why we've also taken, if you think about any kind of research project and informed consent, and it's not just about having a terms of service, but it's really sitting someone down and walking them through the risks and the potential benefits and the things that are unknown. And that's kind of how we're doing it with our app. We have a terms of service, but we actually have a prompt that pops up that says, do you understand that this is not therapy? Even though it's in our terms of, we want people to really be informed. And that's, again, why with children, with assent and needing the permission of the parent, it becomes more complex and important, even more important to engage the parent in that consent process too.
Okay, well, as I expected, with us having a conversation, we've already gone through 40 minutes, and we got about 5, maybe 10 minutes to gab some more. So let's shift into the larger issues of VR. Well, what is your view of the state of the field? Where do you think it's going? Is this just a flash in the pan driven by, the availability of more usable and low cost technology? Or will there be some there moving into the future, or anything around that?
I'm excited. I mean, I think the Oculus Quest has changed the game. Facebook is selling it at a loss, because they do want the data. But I think the Oculus Quest has really changed the game, and we're going to get to 10 million units soon, which is kind of the predicted way that it could start to become more mainstream. I think if you ask a lot of Oculus Quest owners whether they would give up their headset, a lot of them would say no, which I think is an important indicator of whether this is just a fad or something that's going to continue to grow. But in terms of mental health specifically, I think we are starting to see more and more digital mental health interventions being built. What does concern me a little bit about the future is how much of a regulatory wall is going to be placed around the interventions. There's been a lot of advocacy for digital therapeutics, and it's a really important area, but I worry that, does someone need to go to a physician and be prescribed an application if they could download it on their own anyway? What coming back to ethics, what are the implications of restricting access to some of these interventions? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that as well, as we kind of move forward in becomes more popular?
Yeah, it's a very hard question and really would involve a lot of time, but off the cuff, I think we've got a giant amount of challenges in the future of clinical psychology and in general healthcare professions in understanding how much do we push out the door for people to do self-help. What are the limits of that and how we can do it ethically? If people start dishing out crappy self-help applications and people start thinking they're going to fix themselves when they really have a significant mental health challenge and they don't have a good diagnosis and they start treating themselves, I think there is some concerns. By the same token, the digital therapeutics, it's a hot area. It's, I think a lot of ways that companies are starting to think about how they can recoup their investment by being able to charge CMS or insurance companies and so on. I don't think I have a good answer at this point. I think we still have to kind of wade through some of this, but I think anything that limits the availability of good clinical care and puts another barrier is not so good. But we have to be able to think about how we can ethically deliver that with some level of supervision. I'm still kind of old school about this. I think, we can send a Quest or Vive Focus or Pico Neo, these other standalone headsets. We can send that home with clients. But with the supervision of a clinician recommending it as part of the therapeutic regimen. I don't know about the prescription element. That seems to add a little more, but that may be just we're trying to ape the medical field by using a term that's common to pharmaceuticals. I don't think I have a clear answer. I'm still trying to understand all the problems and implications, but as I move forward in my career more, I am becoming more focused on the clinical ethical issues. One thing I'm excited about is that there have been a number of deterioration analyses being done, not where you're looking at your successful patients, but you're looking at the people that didn't benefit. And one that was published in Journal of Anxiety Disorders in 2019 showed that with VR, it's no different than any active treatment, that we're not, when somebody doesn't benefit from treatment, they're not failing worse because we use technology. But this is where I think the field has to go is understanding what are the boundary conditions and not making it so onerous for somebody to get benefit. We're going to be tussling with this, and then you toss in the AI component, and we got a big fight on our hands.
Oh yeah,
moving forward in the future, because the AI element is going to really rattle some cages as it gets better or more commonly employed.
Yeah, but my favorite thing, well, this isn't a good thing, but I think it's a helpful way to understand the landscape, is that if every person who needed treatment in the United States sought treatment, we would need at least 5 million more therapists, licensed therapists. So I think that it kind of, that conveys that AI is going to be a really powerful way to do stepped care, I think, where you have that lowest level of care, right, and then people who need that higher level of care can get there.
That's
so I think it's really exciting.
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you, we've got, let's see, maybe 2 or 3 more minutes here before we should open up for questions. I didn't really get into my giant library of standard questions, but I always have one I like to ask. And that is, if you had 2 years and unlimited resources to build anything you wanted in this space, what would that be?
I think it would be exploring the potential of procedural generation and basically having someone go into a virtual environment and experience it, collecting data, and then customizing their entire environment and kind of these closed loop systems where you can immediately give feedback to them, and building a completely customized, personalized intervention for them based on the data that was collected initially. Especially even there's all these questions about what color should an environment be, what objects should be in there, nature, city, inside, outside. figuring that out and basically building the perfect personalized intervention for every single person. That would be a really powerful thing that could really show off the potential of, and you've mentioned this with like, making VR like a PowerPoint where you can put together the pieces and customize. That's where I think that could be really powerful for people.
What about virtual humans in that mix? You've got real people driving avatars and providing care in Help Club. What about if we get to a level of AI where you can construct your own virtual buddy? Or
we're working on that as well, and I think it's going to be really powerful. I think it's going to be you have Ellie that is unbelievable, and that's for training therapists. And it's unbelievable to have those interactions and I think people also, there's, the research that shows that people might be willing to disclose more, even if they know it's a computer or a bot. They don't have to think it's a real human, but, interacting in that with the veterans that you did the research with, who were more comfortable talking to a computer and disclosing and things like that. I think the virtual human component will be really powerful for individualizing and also for allowing people to have it whenever they want it. I think that's really imagine if someone could be trained, if someone has to wait for their next therapy session and they learn the tools when they're talking about the distress they had a few days ago, compare that to someone who's able to, in the moment of distress, put on the headset, talk to a virtual human and learn how to address the situation in the moment. I think that'll be really effective for skill acquisition.
Well, these are a lot of potentially provocative or contentious issues that we're going to ride into the future. But whenever I have these kinds of discussions, I'm heartened by the fact that there's a lot of bright people like yourself that are thinking about this, that have a good research rudder and want to apply the science rather than shooting from the hip, and are aware of these types of issues. And that's important for the field to grow forward and to really make a difference for the people we want to serve, without any of the by reducing the ethical or professional challenges for patient safety and privacy. I always have to complain about the Quest, even though it is a good piece of equipment, because they're demanding that you have a Facebook account. I think there are other headsets. I got to try the Vive, the most recent version of the Vive Focus. Pretty impressive. And so, it's going to be a real challenge to see how we protect patient privacy moving forward if we want to leverage these powerful display devices. Interesting times ahead. Okay, why don't we open this up to audience questions? Jessica, do you got a few on the line there?
Yeah, actually, there are some of as you guys were talking, there are participants who type out their answers in the chat, the Q&A. And one thing I think they asked is kind of similar to what you guys just discussed, which is about privacy of the users. They're also kind of having the same questions about if we're doing anything to protect the privacy of users. And they think it's kind of scary to share their deepest problems online, people are not very comfortable doing that sometimes, especially when we hear news about Facebook or there's data leaks and things like that. So I guess their question is just what's your plan? What have we done so far? Things like that.
Yeah, in Help Club specifically, one thing is that as part of the informed consent, we let people know that they could be identified, because anyone using their voice is leaving some kind of marker that could be identified. But we take on our end, in terms of data collection, we take every step to de-identify their data, so that just in any kind of research practice where you're storing data under non-identifying numbers and things that are not associated with someone's real identity, that's important. And then we also encourage people not to share personal details so that decrease the likelihood that they could be identified. The challenge is that if this data is also going through servers of other companies, we don't have control over that. So that's where I think the tricky element, the tricky element of privacy is, are we sending someone a device? Because then we can have the power to choose Vive Focus or Pico that has higher level security. Or are we meeting users who already own a Quest and they're logged in through their Facebook and they're opening our app, how do we make sure that they can remain private as well? That's a really important question, I think, too.
Yeah, I feel like there are just a lot of things that we can do for patient privacy, and it's like something that we need to keep moving forward because there's always new technologies and we need to like change our practice all the time too. And there's another question from our attendee is that like, how long does it usually take for the training process to be a helper in the VR stimulation? And is the training part of the VR like program, or is it something that's separate?
We do use the VR for training. It's kind of, taking our own medicine, so to speak. But yeah, so people come in and they're trained in the application, and the training is something that's really important that we're still exploring and optimizing. We started, I think our first cohort was 8 months, but we're decreasing that over time and standardizing the training and things like that. So it's still a little bit of an open question of how long the training takes, but we're really excited to use technology to over time. I think with AI and virtual humans, we'll be able to decrease the amount of training that someone who wants to become a helper, the amount of training that they need to go through in order to actually lead a group session. I think we'll be able to use technology to decrease the amount of training necessary.
I see. And another question is actually, someone asked, how do you sign up for this? They're interested in like how they can participate in this, your project.
Sure. If you go to veryrealhelp.com, and that's HELP, Very Real Help, you can click on Help Club in the upper right and download our app, and it works on any device. So yeah, we'd love to have new people coming in and exploring and giving feedback and everything. So it is available. And again, just to make clear that, this is not a proven mental health support system. So it's experimental. We don't know if it'll help you. So we really don't want anybody to replace, we don't want someone to download our app instead of going to a therapist, because we don't know if it'll help you. But for anybody who's interested in trying it out and giving feedback in the beta, yeah, they'd be welcome to, join and explore.
Yeah. So quick question, is there any like requirements for the device that they're using?
We work on Quest, Mac, PC, and iOS. So if they're able to run any kind of game on their computer, then it should work. We're going to launch on Android eventually, but for now it's just that set of devices.
Okay, yeah. I think these are the questions that we have for today. And thank you so much. So
Let me add one more.
Yeah.
What's it going to take really quick to keep the lights on? Is there a business model for this?
Yeah, we're exploring several different potential business models. I think the simplest one is a subscription. So, we're able to come in at a price point that's a fraction of things like BetterHelp or Talkspace. And, BetterHelp or Talkspace are over $200 a month. And you get, one session a week or whatever the access is. So we're thinking that some kind of subscription that's very, very low cost for the end user will be good. And then we're also excited to collect efficacy data. And if we can prove that what we're doing is effective, then it becomes a very low cost option for payers and larger organizations to come in and subsidize the cost, because it's a fraction of the cost of traditional psychological intervention if we have the data to support that.
Last quick question. Global reach. Have you already had people where it's a non-English speaking group, people from other countries? Or
yeah, we have a global population in Help Club, and that's another challenge with if we had therapists in, therapists have to be licensed in the state in which they're seeing the patient. But we have people from the UK, Australia, we have people in Asia and India, and we have all over the world coming in and experiencing Help Club. So yeah, it has been global from the start, and we're excited about that because that means if you go in at 5 a.m., maybe there'll be someone who was up in the afternoon in their time zone. So we're excited to kind of build the social network and take advantage of the fact that people live across the world in these different places.
Great. Okay, well, Noah, as always, a pleasure. Look forward to hanging out in person sometime soon.
Yes.
Once the COVID dust settles. And Jessica, you got some closing stuff here for us?
Yeah. Noah, continue.
Well, I just want to add one thing. I just want to thank you, Skip, for pioneering this entire field, because, you know, when you started doing this research with virtual reality, there was so much skepticism, and there's been so many waves of people saying, oh, VR is going to be big, and then it isn't. And then, I mean, you've really laid the empirical foundation for people like me to be able to say, hey, look at exposure therapy, look at the power of virtual stimuli and how it can treat a disorder just as effectively as, you know, real life stimuli. So I'm so grateful for, you know, all the work that you've done to prove that this is something that could really change the field of psychology.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I'm just a stubborn old crank, and I've been that way since I was young. So.
Yeah, thank you, Noah and Skip. I feel like this episode is amazing, and we learned a lot of information here. And it's just truly amazing to see how this technology can be applied in the field and how it's like really working. It's magic for people that truly needs it. So also for the product that Skip has on his background is the virtual classroom. And that's kind of similar to, in a sense that we're helping kids who are with ADHD using this product to diagnose them, to notice their head movements, tracking eye movement, hand movement, things like that. So we can find it early then and help like psychiatrists, psychologists to diagnose ADHD, which is really cool. And I think all these different applications will be, we'll see more and more this type of applications in real world, which is really exciting to see. And just on the note of the virtual reality classroom, we have a FDA approval trial running for this study. So we have a couple of data collection sites here. So if you're interested in participating, whoever's watching this podcast later, you can scan this QR code and sign up for the study and participate. So we also have like compensations available as well. And just moving on, I just want to say, like, once again, thank you guys so much for coming to the event. And I hope you guys have learned amazing stuff from our speaker today. And yeah, thank you, Noah. Thank you again to our host, Dr. Rizzo. And I believe we all learned so much about this. And I'm really looking forward to see like how all of these applications turn out in the future and how much more we can do with this technology. So for our audience, just a quick just reminder, the video recordings will be up on our YouTube channel at Cognitive Leap Solutions, Inc. And so please feel free to share this link YouTube video with anyone who might be interested in this topic, needing help, or in this industry trying to learn more about this. So we really look forward. And Skip, do you want to talk a little bit about our upcoming event?
Oh, next month, September?
Yeah.
I've got a mystery guest that is 95% going to be on in September. I haven't settled on the date with them yet, but I've got in October Judy Deutsch and Mayang Mehta from UCLA in November. This is the guy who's been doing VR, neuroscience VR, really strong basic science research with rats in virtual environments. And I had a discussion with him last week, and the guy is brilliant. He studied this stuff on a basic science level, but he has an eye towards informing clinical application based on the basic science and brain behavior relationships that he studied. So that'll be November, October. Judy Deutsch doesn't need an introduction. Been one of the great pioneers in the field of virtual rehabilitation. A great scientist, great friend. September, I'll announce that very shortly. If we get this person, we'll get a lot of folks that will want to come to this because they're really historical figure. That's all I got to say.
Okay, we're so excited. I'm already excited for our next speaker coming up. So for our people who will be participating, so mark your calendar. We'll send out emails soon regarding the future events. So we really look forward to seeing you again at our future events. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Also to our speakers, thank you so much.